Have you ever wondered if the frozen vegetables sitting in your freezer are as wholesome as you believe, or if convenience has quietly taken something away? For decades, families have leaned on bags of peas, corn, and spinach, trusting that they offered nutrition as well as savings. But hidden behind the frosty packaging are questions about taste, nutrients, and health that demand a closer look. So are frozen vegetables really the healthy choice we think they are? We begin with the story of how a simple innovation reshaped the American kitchen, marking the true origins of frozen vegetables. Long before freezers became common household appliances, Americans relied on gardens, local markets, and seasonal harvests for their vegetables. What you ate was tied to the calendar and to the land around you: peas in spring, corn in summer, and hardy root vegetables stored for the cold months ahead. The invention of freezing changed all of that. It was Clarence Birdseye in the early 20th century who discovered a method to freeze food quickly, preserving not only its appearance but also its nutritional content. This was nothing short of revolutionary. Suddenly, it became possible to eat vegetables year-round, regardless of season or distance from the farm. By the time home freezers entered American kitchens after the Second World War, frozen vegetables had become a symbol of progress. They offered families a new kind of security: food that would not spoil overnight, that could wait patiently in the freezer until needed. For mothers balancing households in the 1950s, this was a quiet miracle. Yet it also introduced a shift in how people thought about freshness. Was food that had been harvested months before and kept at sub-zero temperatures truly the same as what came from the garden that morning? That question has lingered for generations. Frozen vegetables were celebrated as modern and efficient, yet they also marked the beginning of a long debate about convenience versus quality. And as they spread across supermarkets, they slowly changed the relationship Americans had with the food on their tables. The origins of frozen vegetables are not just about science, but about how technology reshaped daily life in ways both comforting and unsettling. From that foundation, we move to the scientific side, asking what really happens to vitamins and minerals when food is preserved through freezing. The question of nutritional value preserved. For many people, the assumption has always been that freezing strips vegetables of their health benefits. After all, we are told that fresh is best, yet studies have shown a more complicated picture. In some cases, vegetables frozen soon after harvest retain as many nutrients as their fresh counterparts, sometimes even more. This is because fresh produce often spends days, even weeks in transport and storage before it reaches a plate, losing vitamins along the way. Freezing halts this decline, locking in much of what was present at the moment of harvest. Spinach, for example, can lose significant vitamin C content after only a few days at room temperature, while frozen spinach maintains much of it for months. But not everything survives the deep freeze intact. Water-soluble vitamins, such as B vitamins and vitamin C, are more vulnerable. The blanching process, where vegetables are briefly boiled before freezing, can cause nutrient loss. Minerals and fiber, however, remain largely unchanged. For families seeking a reliable way to feed children balanced meals, frozen vegetables often offered more consistent nutrition than what was available at the local store in winter. Still, the perception lingers that frozen must mean less. Advertisements from the past highlighted bright colors and garden-fresh taste, trying to reassure shoppers that nothing had been lost. In truth, what freezing preserves is complicated: a blend of retained nutrients and diminished qualities. The real answer is not simple, and it forces us to reconsider what healthy really means. Are frozen vegetables a compromise, or do they quietly deliver more than they are given credit for? Building on that, we face the reality that convenience often changes texture, leaving once crisp produce soft or soggy, a trade-off known as the texture trade-off. Anyone who has ever opened a bag of frozen green beans or broccoli knows the disappointment of limp vegetables. What looks perfect in the package often changes once heat is applied. This is because freezing forms ice crystals inside the vegetable's cells, breaking down the structure that gives them firmness. When thawed and cooked, the once rigid walls collapse, leaving vegetables softer, sometimes mushy. For older generations who grew up on garden harvests or market produce, this change was especially striking. Vegetables that once snapped with freshness now felt tired, and yet this compromise became widely accepted. Families were willing to sacrifice crunch for reliability. Not all vegetables suffer equally. Corn and peas hold their shape better, while leafy greens like spinach wilt and collapse. Carrots, once crisp, can turn rubbery. The result is a shift in expectation. Frozen vegetables are no longer judged by the same standard as fresh. Recipes were adjusted, tastes adapted, and an entire generation came to see this softer version as normal. Still, texture remains one of the strongest criticisms against frozen vegetables. It is not about nutrients or even flavor, but about the feel in the mouth, the sensory experience that tells us if something is alive or lifeless. This is why some people still avoid frozen produce, associating it with hospital meals, cafeteria trays, or hurried weeknight dinners. The trade-off is unavoidable, but it raises a deeper question. How much of our connection to food is about health, and how much is about the pleasure of biting into something that still feels alive? Linked to that shift is the way freezers broke the rhythm of the seasons, giving families corn in December or peas in March, an idea captured by seasonality versus year-round supply. For most of human history, eating vegetables was tied to the land and the season. Winter meant storage crops like potatoes or turnips, while summer was a feast of abundance. Frozen vegetables shattered this natural cycle. Suddenly, strawberries could appear in the middle of January, and green beans no longer belonged to late summer alone. This change reshaped diets and expectations. No longer did families plan meals around what was available in the garden or at the local market. Instead, the freezer aisle promised consistency. This consistency was especially powerful in America, a country built on abundance and choice. To always have everything was seen as progress, even a sign of national strength. But something was lost along the way. The anticipation of seasonal foods, the joy of the first spring asparagus, or the sweetness of late summer corn faded when those same foods became available year-round. For older generations, this shift brought mixed feelings. On one hand, it meant children could eat vegetables more regularly. On the other, it meant a weakening of tradition, of seasonal rhythms that once anchored family meals and cultural rituals. Eating from the freezer created a sense of detachment from nature's cycles, a quiet transformation with lasting cultural effects. The question remains, is constant availability a gift, or has it dulled the meaning of food that once carried the joy of timing in place? From there, the conversation widens to hidden ingredients, where some frozen goods carried salt, sauces, or preservatives, raising concerns under hidden additives and processing. Frozen vegetables are often marketed as pure and untouched, a harvest locked in time. But when you look closer, the story is more complicated. Many products are not just vegetables, but vegetables blended with butter, cream, cheese sauces, or heavy seasoning. For families shopping quickly, it was easy to miss the fine print on the package. What looked like a simple bag of green beans might contain added sodium to enhance flavor or preservatives to keep colors bright. This is not to say all frozen vegetables carry hidden ingredients, but the rise of convenience foods blurred the line between nutrition and indulgence. By the 1970s and 1980s, freezer aisles had become crowded with vegetables swimming in cheese or smothered in sauces, designed to appeal to children or rushed parents. The nutritional cost was high. Dishes that once promised vitamins and fiber now delivered excess fat and salt. Health experts began to warn that the convenience of frozen produce was undermined by what was being added to it. Even today, some families equate frozen vegetables with these processed versions, unaware that plain, unsalted options are often available. The debate raises larger questions about trust. When packaging suggests farm fresh, but the product is more akin to fast food, consumers are left in the dark. Frozen vegetables became symbols not only of preservation, but of hidden choices, where what seemed healthy sometimes carried a quiet compromise. It is here that the line between nourishment and marketing becomes most visible, and where buyers are challenged to look past the cheerful designs on the box to see what truly lies inside. That concern naturally leads to another common issue, where time in storage leaves its mark, shaping both taste and nutrition in what is known as the freezer burn effect. Anyone who has opened a frosted bag of peas or found ice crystals clinging to broccoli knows this silent enemy. Freezer burn occurs when air reaches the food, drawing out moisture and leaving vegetables dry, tough, and often tasteless. It does not make the food unsafe, but it changes everything about how it feels and tastes on the plate. For families who depended on their freezer for bulk storage, this was a constant frustration. The promise of a reliable meal turned into disappointment when the food no longer resembled what had been frozen months earlier. Nutritionally, most elements remain intact, but the sensory experience is damaged beyond repair. People often describe freezer-burned vegetables as bland, cardboard-like, or lifeless. The irony is that the very tool meant to preserve freshness becomes the reason freshness is lost. Careful storage, sealed bags, and rotation of stock can prevent much of this, but many households are too busy or unaware to follow these steps. The result is wasted food, wasted money, and a lingering perception that frozen vegetables are simply second-rate. This perception, once formed, is hard to undo. Freezer burn is not just a technical flaw, it is a symbol of broken trust. The vegetables are still safe, but they no longer feel alive. And in food, perception matters as much as fact. The freezer burn effect remains one of the quiet reasons many older consumers hesitate to fill their carts with frozen produce, even when logic and science suggest it could still be a wise choice. Yet for many families, these drawbacks were outweighed by what truly mattered at the checkout line: the balance of savings and speed in the cost and convenience factor. For households on tight budgets, frozen vegetables offered a reliable way to stretch meals. A bag could sit in the freezer for weeks, ready to fill out a plate of meat and potatoes without the risk of spoilage. Fresh produce, by contrast, often wilted or rotted before it could be eaten. In the middle of the 20th century, when waste was costly and shopping trips less frequent, this reliability was priceless. Mothers and fathers could rely on frozen peas or corn to put something green on the table even when schedules were tight or the garden was bare. The price advantage was equally important. Frozen vegetables, sold in bulk or family-sized bags, provided nutrition at a fraction of the cost of out-of-season fresh produce. For working-class families, this was not just convenience, but survival. Convenience extended beyond cost. Pre-washed, pre-cut, and ready to cook, frozen vegetables saved time in kitchens where hours were already stretched thin. As more women entered the workforce in the 1960s and 1970s, this convenience reshaped family routines, reducing preparation time while keeping meals complete. Critics argue that convenience eroded cooking traditions, replacing careful preparation with shortcuts. But for many, it was not laziness, it was necessity. The freezer gave families flexibility, security, and breathing room. Even today, the convenience factor continues to influence shopping habits. For busy households, frozen vegetables remain a lifeline. They may lack some of the charm of fresh produce, but their role in making balanced meals affordable and accessible cannot be ignored. This sets the stage for one of the most direct comparisons ever studied: whether peas from the garden really outshine those from a bag in the debate of fresh versus frozen nutrition showdown. The question has been asked for decades, and the answer is less clear than many assume. Fresh produce, harvested at its peak and eaten immediately, carries undeniable vibrancy. The crisp snap of a bean, the sweetness of corn fresh from the cob, the earthy bite of spinach pulled from the soil. These qualities are unmatched. But the reality of modern food systems complicates this picture. Fresh vegetables often travel long distances, spending days or even weeks in trucks and warehouses. During that time, their vitamin content gradually declines. By the time they arrive in supermarkets, they may have lost much of their original value. Frozen vegetables, by contrast, are often processed within hours of harvest. Blanched and frozen, they retain many nutrients that fresh produce loses during transport. Studies have shown that frozen spinach can hold more vitamin C than fresh spinach left in a refrigerator for several days. Still, not all is preserved. Certain delicate compounds degrade in the blanching process, leaving frozen options slightly less potent in some areas. The debate becomes less about absolute superiority and more about context. For families living near farms, fresh is unbeatable. But for the majority who rely on supermarkets, frozen may actually deliver more reliable nutrition. What matters most is not the romantic image of the garden, but the practical question of what arrives on the dinner plate. The showdown is not a clear victory for either side, but a reminder that health is shaped by both science and circumstance. And in that tension, families make choices every day, often without realizing the quiet trade-offs involved. No discussion would be complete without considering safety, where freezing reduced bacterial risks but could not erase mistakes made before storage. a reminder of food safety and hygiene. For many families, the freezer became a quiet guardian. It kept food from spoiling quickly, slowed down the growth of harmful bacteria, and extended the life of vegetables far beyond what fresh produce could manage. Yet the freezer is not a cure-all. If vegetables are mishandled at the farm, in the factory, or even in the home, before they are frozen, contamination can still follow. Washing, blanching, and freezing remove many risks, but not all. Outbreaks of illness tied to frozen produce, though rare, remind us that the cold only pauses life. It does not sterilize it. Once thawed, the bacteria can awaken. For older generations who lived through food shortages and rationing, the safety of frozen vegetables felt like a blessing, but it was not absolute. Hygiene also extends to the household. Freezers must be kept at the correct temperature, and vegetables must be stored properly to remain safe. Too many families discovered that power outages or broken seals could render entire freezers of food unsafe to eat. These small details highlight a larger truth. Frozen vegetables are safer than many alternatives, but they are not invincible. For the consumer, trust in safety is built not just on the product itself, but on the invisible chain of steps from farm to factory to freezer to table. That chain is strong, but never unbreakable. Frozen vegetables remind us that convenience and safety go hand in hand, but vigilance remains part of the equation. From health, we shift to the planet itself, where energy-hungry cold chains clash with the benefit of reducing spoilage, raising questions about the environmental impact. Freezing vegetables requires enormous infrastructure. Farms must harvest and transport quickly. Factories must blanch, package, and chill. Then, fleets of trucks powered by diesel or electricity keep the cold unbroken until the vegetables arrive in supermarkets. At every step, energy is consumed. Critics argue this makes frozen produce one of the more resource-intensive food choices, tying every bag of peas to power plants and carbon emissions. Yet there is another side to the story. Frozen vegetables dramatically reduce waste. Fresh produce often spoils on store shelves or in home refrigerators, contributing to mountains of discarded food. Frozen vegetables, by contrast, last for months or even a year, cutting waste in half or more. Which is more damaging to the environment? Energy spent keeping food cold, or energy wasted producing food that never gets eaten? The answer is not simple. For some experts, frozen vegetables strike a balance, reducing waste while demanding steady power. For others, they symbolize the hidden costs of a food system that prioritizes availability over sustainability. For the consumer, the choice is clouded. A bag of frozen corn feels innocent enough, but behind it lies a vast system of factories, freezers, and trucks humming day and night. Eating frozen vegetables may nourish the body, but it also ties us into larger debates about how modern convenience reshapes the planet we all depend on. All of these changes shaped not just meals but lifestyles, as frozen vegetables became a tool for households adapting to new rhythms of work and family life, reflecting changing family habits. Before the rise of freezers, mealtime was often an all-day affair. Vegetables had to be harvested, washed, and cooked quickly before they spoiled. The introduction of frozen vegetables cut hours from this cycle, giving families back precious time. In the 1960s and 1970s, as more women entered the workforce, this shift became essential. Dinner no longer required endless preparation. Instead, a bag from the freezer could be boiled, steamed, or microwaved in minutes. Families who once depended on gardens or daily shopping trips adjusted to new rhythms. Mealtime became shorter, simpler, and in many cases more reliable. Critics worried that traditions were being lost, that the art of cooking was being replaced by convenience. But for many households, frozen vegetables were a lifeline, making balanced meals possible in a world that demanded more hours away from home. The impact went beyond nutrition. Freezers changed how families shopped, how often they visited stores, and how they thought about abundance. Stocking up became a sign of security, a way to face uncertain times with a full freezer and peace of mind. Even today, older generations remember the comfort of knowing that no matter how busy or tight money became, a meal could be built from the frozen aisle. Frozen vegetables were never just about peas and carrots. They were about adapting to new expectations of time, work, and family. And finally, we arrive at the present moment, where experts and consumers continue to weigh the balance of convenience and nutrition in what remains the modern debate. Frozen vegetables have traveled a long journey from laboratory innovation to everyday staple. For some, they remain an unsung hero, offering affordable, accessible nutrition to millions. For others, they are symbols of compromise, delivering softer textures, altered flavors, and the shadow of additives or freezer burn. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Today's shopper faces a crowded freezer aisle. Organic, conventional, mixed, sauced, unsalted. Each bag tells a different story, but the core question remains the same. Are frozen vegetables truly as healthy as we want to believe? Modern science continues to reveal nuance. Some studies show frozen vegetables preserve more nutrition than fresh produce that has traveled long distances. Others highlight the loss of delicate compounds in the freezing process. Experts argue, consumers debate, and families continue to choose. What has not changed is the role of frozen vegetables as a mirror of modern life. They represent convenience, technology, and the desire for control over what appears on the dinner table. Yet they also remind us of what is lost when food becomes disconnected from season, soil, and tradition. The modern debate is not just about peas and carrots. It is about trust in science, faith in convenience, and the timeless question of what it means to eat well. As long as families continue to ask these questions, the freezer aisle will remain more than a row of cold shelves. It will remain a stage where the choices of health, time, and culture quietly play out. In the end, frozen vegetables reveal both the promise of modern convenience and the quiet compromises that shape the meals we place on our tables. They offer nutrition and security, yet still leave us questioning what is truly healthy. If this reflection was valuable to you, it helps us greatly if you like this video and subscribe to the Hidden Menu for more stories told in this way.